Hello, my name is Angela Schumann and I am the Shakespeare Whisperer, and we are being joined once again by Dr. Peter Groves for our series on Measure for Measure. So it's been quite a while since we've filmed one of these. We've had a very extensive lockdown here in Melbourne, so we're finally back. Our hair is a lot longer.
Yes, that's right.
We are picking up right where we left off last time, which is in Act 3, Scene 1, around line 110, depending on your edition. So at the end of our last video, we talked about how Isabella is visiting her brother Claudio in prison with the unfortunate news, you're gonna die, and there would be a way for you to get out of it, which would be for me to sleep with Angelo, but I'm not going to. And she says to him, "Oh, were it but my life, I'd throw it down for your deliverance as frankly as a pin." And we notice that there's hesitation in his response.
Well, it's a missing offbeat, as frankly as a pin. Thanks, dear Isabel. So there's a hesitation just before it. So it's it's not entirely frank and delighted thanks. It's more a rather sceptical. Well, it's okay for you to say that because you're the one facing the axe. There's a lot of kind of brotherly, sisterly tension between them two in a way, isn't there? It's quite realistic.
Absolutely.
So she tells him, again, in what must be a rather irritating way, be ready, Claudio, for your death tomorrow. So she's advising him to get ready for an outing to the park or something.
But he doesn't seem to be following her train of thought here.
No.
His mind's still on a different track.
Well, that's right. He's like a trapped animal. He's looking for a way out at this point. So he's beginning to think to himself, has he affections in him that can make him bite the law by the nose when he would force it? Sure, it is no sin, or of the deadly seven it is the least. So he's thinking, this man, Angelo, he's wise, he's learned, he's a doctor of the law. He wouldn't risk his eternal soul for something that, for a bit of nookie, should we say. So maybe it's not such a big deal. In the way that Lucio, doesn't regard it as one. And when he says of the seven it is the least, it's actually some warrant for that, in the sense, if you think of Dante's Inferno, it's the first sin that the travellers encounter, and it's highest up because it's, in a sense, the least
bad.
The least bad, because there's an element of mutuality in it. Desire often gets mixed up with affection and respect and so on, and caring and nurturing. So it's, the next circle of hell is the gluttons, who are absolutely degraded and filthy and bestial. So there's some element of truth in this. On the other hand, trying to pretend it's not a sin is mere rationalisation and wishful thinking.
I think just because it's the least of the seven deadly sins, it's okay.
It's okay.
It's not a deadly sin, but...
Yes, exactly. And she's not following at all. Which is the least? She says, rather puzzled. And he's still on his own track, like sort of parallel trains. If it were damnable, he being so wise, would he, for the momentary trick, be perdurably fined, punished forever? Oh, Isabel.
I never noticed this in Claudio before. Like, because he says, bloody Angelo, they both agree on that. And then I can see him, trying to rationalise, oh sister, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if he did it, kind of thing. But I didn't realise he was trying to kind of justify Angelo, or he still had faith in Angelo's moral compass.
No, I don't think it's his moral compass he has faith in. He has faith in his intelligence. He's saying, if, he knows the law, he's clearly learned in these matters, and he's not a divine exactly, but he's clearly got knowledge of these things. So he wouldn't risk his own soul for a momentary trick, what Middleton calls the bewildering minute. So maybe it's not so bad after all. So it's not that he thinks Angelo is a moral person here. He thinks he's a prudent person. I know prudence is one of the
virtues.
cardinal virtues, yes, but here it's a more narrowly self-regarding kind of prudence. Practical. Yeah, yeah. So,
Interesting.
yeah. Well, in fact, it accords with the view everyone has of Angelo, that he's not given to being passionately driven, throwing everything to the winds.
Yeah.
But rather he's calculating and cautious and rather bureaucratic. And therefore, if he thinks it's okay for a little bit of whatever, maybe it's okay. And of course, this is all rationalisation anyway. He's clutching at straws.
When you're facing death,
yes,
you know,
yes, he's
the mind can
exactly
do many things.
Exactly.
And then Isabella asks, "What says my brother?"
And he says, "Death is a fearful thing."
Which again, so human, so understandable, and shameful life are hateful.
Notice incidentally,
Shamed life hateful.
we've been talking about these little metrical things here, that you use in the play. There's a nice overlap there. He leaps in when, to make his point of view here. So, in fact, if you say, "What says my brother?"
What says my brother?
Death is a fearful thing. So he leaps in. Death and the last syllable brother overlap. He can't let her finish speaking before he tells her this.
Do these two lines, 119 and 120, do they make a single line of iambic pentameter? Like, should they have been?
119. I might have got different numbers here.
Oh, right, these ones. What says my brother?
Oh yes, they do. Yes, your editor. Now we've been praising your editor. He falls down here.
Yeah. So if you look at
mine just below my finger, they're written as two separate lines.
when
they are in fact one
meter
line
suggests-
with the meter is actually instructing the actors what to do here. So it's actually stage direction. What what's his name? The famous Shakespearean director calls hidden stage directions. The RSC chap, I can't remember that. Doesn't matter. It'll come back to me.
Scream it out when it does.
Yes. So there, we've been giving him lots of brownie points and gold stars, but no, he's fallen down on the job there. You can't trust any one single edition, So, unshamed life a hateful, she says, which of course he produces 3 feet and she follows it with 3 feet, so there's a kind of balance there, so they're producing Alexandrian between themselves. And then he comes out with this passionate speech, "Aye, but to die, because we don't know where," which is an interesting way of beginning it, isn't it? A bit like Hamlet, who, the country, that undiscovered country from whose born no traveller returns. To lie in cold obstruction and to rot, he's imagining lying in the earth, being full of worms, the cold earth with the rain and the wind. This sensible, warm motion to become a kneaded clod. So it's a marvellously imaginative apprehension of being dead, but being aware that you're dead, which is, of course, what a lot of people kind of imagine about death.
That's true.
Like the adolescent says, "I'm going to kill myself," and then they'll be sorry, and he imagines himself watching them being sorry,
Yeah, or you imagine yourself at your own funeral.
Yeah, because it's very hard to imagine non-existence.
Well, the difference is though that you're, then they'll be sorry or whatever. You're separate from your body. You can kind of hover over them and watch
Right.
them. Whereas this is still a materialistic.
Yes, trapped in a body. Yes,
Death,
that's right. And the delighted spirit, that is to say, the spirit capable of delight, nonetheless to bathe in fiery floods or to reside in thrilling regions of thick ribbed ice. So he's imagining versions of hell here, of course. And in traditional hell is not just a hot place, it's also a very cold place in many places. The bottom of Dante's Inferno is frozen solid, where Lucifer sits. To be imprisoned in the viewless winds and blown with restless violence round about the pendant world. And then, of course, fascinatingly, we talk about Dante, that is the punishment of the lustful in that first circle, the second circle of hell, technically. That because they have willingly surrendered to passion, they've refused to, if you like, direct or guide themselves. They have that capacity taken away from them. It's one of the ironic punishments of hell that Dante specialises in. So that's actually very interesting, isn't it? Either he read that, clearly.
As in Shakespeare.
Shakespeare,
Read Dante,
yes.
yeah.
Shakespeare and Dante, yes, not Claudio. Or maybe Claudio did too. Or, well, he's talked to somebody about it. He had a great friend called John Florio, who was an Italian, who wrote a dictionary of English and Italian. And maybe they discussed Dante. But I think it's possible. I don't think there was a contemporary translation, but Shakespeare could read Italian. I think there's little doubt about that if you look. And I won't go into it now because it's a bit involved. It's to do with textual details. But it depends upon it depends on the translation he used, if he did use translation, for the source of Othello, Cintio's Il Moro, from the Hecatomb Mittii. And well, there are a couple of places where, I will say it very briefly, a couple of places where Shakespeare uses a word that is not in the French translation, which of course we know he could read French, but actually in the Italian. So Iago talks about a herb as acerb as the coloquintida. Acerb, a lovely word, but rather rare, meaning bitter. But the Italian just called it acerbissima, very bitter. And of course, that's the normal Italian word for bitter. So there are other examples, I won't go into more. So Shakespeare could read Italian, and therefore he could have read Dante. I think probably he did.
It does seem likely.
It does seem likely.
Either that, or it kind of trickled into cultural norms of how they saw hell.
I suppose so. Yeah, I don't know about that. That's interesting. It would take some evidence, or even a kind of spoken folklore, Catholic folklore. Don't. That's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
But a bit of a rabbit hole, perhaps.
Yeah. Anyway, now we all have our Dante reference from Shakespeare.
Exactly. And actually, okay, since we are doing this, Shakespeare is one of the first writers to introduce the kind of complex characters we see in a play, like highly developed measure, who have a hidden life, a life hidden from themselves, which they can't peer into. And Dante is perhaps the very first writer to do this. You look at a character like Francesca in the episode we've just been talking about, Canto 5 of the Inferno, and she simply doesn't understand herself and her motives. She has no insight into them, partly because of course, what Aquinas calls the wound of ignorance with the fall. And that inability to understand that in herself gives us a sense of a character who is divided from herself, which of course is the essence of our sense of the unconscious and the conscious mind living and churning away beneath our conscious selves. So it's actually quite interesting. This may be a source of Shakespeare's own interest in this. Anyway, that's again another bit of a rabbit hole.
I did publish a book chapter on this.
Oh yes, you did.
Yeah.
You did. Yes.
About linking, I compared Isabella's psychological complexity and self-deception with Francesca's from Dante's Inferno, but it is in French.
It is in French, yes.
It's in a book called Dante and Shakespeare. I'll say it in English: Dante and Shakespeare, Cosmology, Politics, and Poetics.
Excellent. Good. You could put a link in the the description.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I'll remember to do that.
Yeah. Excellent. Sorry.
It's interesting as well that Claudio. I just checked because I couldn't remember if the Duke had already visited him in prison or not, but he had already visited him with that kind of false consolation that we talked about.
Oh yes, that the pagan consolation.
Yeah, and now it's interesting that seemed to have germinated in Claudio's mind, and now he's kind of instead of having this kind of Christian hope of the afterlife, well, I know I did nothing wrong, and
that's true.
Heaven and all the rest of it, he is.
Yes, there's no sense of a merciful God here, is there?
Yeah.
That's actually, it's quite
there's
interesting.
There's either hell or there's just rotting as a corpse.
Yeah, because after all, the Duke is supposedly a friar.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
a spiritual authority.
Friar, yeah.
So he's had a kind of pernicious influence on Claudio. How interesting. Yeah, it's another strike against the Duke. He's,
Once again,
messing
with people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Or to be worse than the worst of those that lawless and uncertain thought imagine howling. Which is interesting, isn't it? Because that's attributing the nature of damnation to lawless and uncertain thought. Well, again, I think if we can say anything about this, we can say that Claudio's orthodoxy, if he was orthodox, has been kind of shaken a bit by the friar.
Yeah.
Put off kilter, perhaps.
Interestingly, the bit that he says next, the weariest and most loathed worldly life that age, ache, penury and imprisonment can lay on nature is a paradise to what we fear of death. Isn't that a reversal of what the Duke says to him? Like, think about how hard life is.
Oh yes, that's right, it is, isn't it?
There's
Yes,
kind of a response to that.
right.
He sat in prison and thought about it and
Yes.
stewed over it and been like, actually no, I will take the sufferings of life
That's right.
over the terror of death.
That's right.
Which, interestingly, again, is kind of a similar thing to Hamlet's musings on suicide. Like Hamlet's, talk about the slings and arrows, about outrageous fortune and the injustices of life.
Yeah.
And he says, but we don't know what comes after,
Yes.
and we're afraid of it, so we'll take all the suffering that's here.
Exactly. Yeah, and of course, as we've said so often, these two plays are written at about the same time, so same sort of thoughts going through Shakespeare's mind. Her response is, alas, alas, as though, I don't know, he's showing madness or something. It's and then
You'd think that would be the moment for empathy.
yes,
like, even
you
if
would
you're like,
rather.
I'm not going to sleep with Angela, you are going to die. You think that would be the moment to be
You
like,
would.
yeah, far out. It is horrible. Like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
let's cry together. Like, this is really shit.
That's right. And it does show, doesn't it, that Isabella lacks a kind of emotional development.
Yeah.
There's a hint of her being sort of shut up and claustrated, as the technical term is. I know there's not exactly.
We've talked about this. We've talked about her repression and suppression and potentially like autism spectrum.
Yeah, that's right.
Behaviour and thought patterns coming
That's
through.
right. That's right. Yes, exactly.
Not that we're able to
No.
claim that we're able to diagnose
No,
such a thing,
no.
or that people on the spectrum don't have empathy, because that's not true at all.
No.
It
Exactly.
just seems to sometimes misread
Yeah.
the emotional state of things.
Well, just as she misread Angelo from the beginning, she was baffled by what might have seemed obvious to another woman, that was basically trying to get into her pants. It didn't occur to her, especially as a novice nun, perhaps.
Well, it did subconsciously though. I think that
Yes,
was
exactly.
that was more motivated by.
So there's a kind of repression going on there, a kind of mechanism. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sweet sister, let me live. There's an urgent appeal.
I love that line.
Yes,
Maybe I don't know if
isn't
it's
it?
like the
So direct.
sibilance or something. The repetition of the S sounds. I don't know what it is. Every time it just gets me. Sweet sister,
Yeah.
let me live.
Yes, exactly.
Whew.
Exactly. It's very interesting. It's what you call an amphibious section here, by the way. It's a weird term. But what you've got is 3 part lines, which together make 2 full lines, because alas, alas is both the ending of Taught Me Fear of Death, alas, alas, and the beginning of alas, alas, sweet sister, let me live. And that makes 2 lines ending in death and live, interestingly, too, as a kind of contrast. So it's a rather neat little... Shakespeare does this quite a lot, actually. Yeah. What sin you do to save a brother's life, nature dispenses with the deed so far that it becomes a virtue. Again, this is Angelo type thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, and nature doesn't decide moral law.
No.
Well, I mean, there's the idea of natural law, but...
No, but the point is here, nature meaning a sister's natural affection for a brother, is what he means. So that, the powers that be will look, more tolerantly on it because you're saving your brother's life.
I see, okay.
It becomes a virtue. Well, that's, pushing it a bit.
Although I think it probably would be to
A mitigating circumstance.
like to fornicate because you're being blackmailed or else someone will be killed. I think that's like
Yeah, well, again, we're getting back in, because, of course, Angelo presents exactly this argument, doesn't he? And then he backs away from it. But,
I mean, he can't really save himself here if he's going down this path. But for Isabella, I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, Catholic casuistry, like figuring this stuff out.
well, Angelo says our compelled sins stand more for number than account. In other words, they might be ticking off a box, but they don't weigh against us. But the whole point is, I think, that there's no such thing as a compelled sin. Sin must always be a choice. So, if I suddenly tied Angela to the chair here and started force-feeding her cream cakes...
Yeah, I'm not a glutton.
No, exactly.
But, I mean, I just don't think, like, if you... Like, you can choose the lesser evil. Like, if you have to steal to feed your family, that's not a sin. I think the same principle might apply for her. Like, Angela's not off the hook, but because he's put her in this position.
That's a good point, yes. Well, yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, that tradition of casuistry, that is to say, of weighing the circumstances of action in terms of moral judgment, has a long tradition. And of course, in Protestant terms, casuistry is a dyslogistic word. It's a bad word because it suggests rationalization and lawyerly arguments and sophistry and all that. But in fact, it's a reasonable way of dealing with complex moral issues. And it's one of the subtleties of medieval Catholic thought that Protestantism kind of abolished with its clear-cut distinction. Sin, not sin. That's it. Black, white. Yes, no. Which doesn't really conform to anybody's experience of, operating in the world, I suppose. So, yeah, that's actually quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But she is not going to... He's not going to provide any of that. Oh, you beast! Oh, faithless coward! Oh, dishonest wretch! Have you made a man out of my vice? It's a very violent response. And in a sense, you can say, well, look, she's got good reason not to do this because she's a novice, she's about to enter the nunnery and so on. And that's fine. But that doesn't account for the violence of her response, does it?
Yeah. I mean, you could just be like, no, sorry.
Yeah.
I can see why.
Yes, exactly.
I can see where you're at.
Yes, exactly.
I wish there was another way. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. That would be a kind of humane response, but no, she. And I suppose there are kind of plausible reasons why she should feel this. She perhaps is to a certain extent torn between these two different things, and she doesn't like being put in that position, and she's accusing Claudio rather than Angelo of putting her in that position of having to choose either chastity or his life.
Yeah.
So she responds by lashing out at the nearest victim, which is Claudio.
Okay, as in her conscience might be like, you should do this, and she's just...
Yeah.
Okay, because it does seem like, I mean, it feels callous to say an overreaction given the situation, but yeah.
Yeah, so that she's angry at Claudio irrationally for this impossible dilemma that Angelo is basically forced him into. That whatever she does at this point, her conscience isn't going to let her off the hook entirely. So that's one way of dealing with it. You get angry with the person who's apparently put you in that position. So it's not a kind of incest to take life from my sister's shame, which is pushing it a bit far. And then we get the same,
She really attacks his manhood.
Yes.
What should I think? Heaven shield my mother played my father fair, for such a warped slip of wilderness ne'er issued from his blood.
Yes, exactly.
So that we mustn't be you must be illegitimate because no son of my father's would behave in such a way.
Exactly. Take my defiance.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, the next line has an interesting missing beat, and it's in a very interesting place. Die, perish, boom. Might but my bending down, reprieve thee. And so I think this is what I call a percussive beat, which is sometimes when somebody strikes somebody else. We have it in Ant and Cleopatra where, the message is being really annoying and he says, Madam, good madam, patience, what say you? Bam! And she hits him, and that's actually the stage direction. But you can't always trust.
A rare stage direction.
Yeah, very rare, because Shakespeare on the whole doesn't put them in. Largely because he didn't write these things to be printed for the general public. He wrote them, and he didn't have much control of them when they were printed. There was no copyright for authors in those days. I think we've mentioned this before. So, since he's going to be on stage or around, excuse me, Bill, what do I do here? He doesn't feel the need often to write stage directions in. And it's interesting, you said, take my defiance. Now, defiance is a technical term for a knight. If you challenge a knight's honour, he slaps you over the face with his glove.
Yeah.
And that says, we will meet at a certain time and have a joust. So I think she slaps her at this point. It's not understood because people don't understand how meter works, but there it is, die, perish, boom. I put my bending down. And it's very appropriate at this point, clearly, since she said, take my defiance. So again, it's an extreme, it's a literally violent response.
Yeah.
Might put my bending down, reprieve thee from thy fate, it should proceed. I'll pray 1,000 prayers for thy death, no word to save thee.
Hang on. Might but my bending down reprieve thee from thy fate?
Yeah.
What's her bending down exactly?
Well, like stooping. Remember earlier on, Lucio says in the first interview with Angelo, if it were but a pin, that you dropped, you'd put more effort into it. So bending down, to stoop to get a pin. So the memory
so this is
of
not
that initial.
a euphemism, or this is
Oh,
not
no.
like...
No. She means the lightest thing I could do, the very least thing I could do. Even that, I wouldn't do even that for you now.
Oh,
Yeah.
I get it. Even if all I had to do was
Yeah,
bend
but
down a little bit to save you, your death should proceed. It
Yes.
should proceed. Your fate should proceed.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I do think there's a slight memory of that, even if, picking up the pin. If you needed a pin, you can so you can stoop to. Yeah. So if we put the word even in, but even my bending down, reprieve thee from thy fate, it should proceed.
I pray 1,000 prayers for thy death, no word to save thee.
Yeah.
Well, that's very charitable, isn't
It's
it?
a little
It's
OTT, as they say, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to watch the old wrath there with
Yeah.
the 7 deadlies.
That's right, and as I said, we've seen where this anger is coming from. It's from her being put in this impossible situation,
Yeah.
and her kicking out against it, because she can't quite process it.
Yeah.
She can't consciously entertain the idea that there might be some moral case for her doing this thing.
Yeah.
Because she's an absolutist. She's an absolutist. It's a kind of young, untried, naive absolutism, just like Angelo. She's the mirror image of Angelo. Except nicer. But not at this point.
She's a much better. But even so though, she didn't.
No, she doesn't mean it. And immediately in the next scene with the Duke, she's looking for ways to save him. So this is an outburst. This is an angry outburst. It's not any kind of considered statement of.
And we see how really distraught she is when she hears that Claudio's been supposedly killed. She's really torn up.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, it's precisely because she cares for Claudio that she's so angry. It's her love for him that's doing this. Because if she didn't really care, she'd just say, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do that."
Yeah, that's true. That's so true.
No word. Incidentally, no word to save thee. Nay, hear me, Isabel. A classic overlap. So nay and thee overlap.
They don't in my, as in
again,
my
I know.
edition doesn't put them as a share line. Does yours?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's again, in a sense, it doesn't matter what an editor does with those lines.
Does it? Is it another one of those amphibious lines where it connects with the next one?
It is. It's a lovely amphibious. Yeah.
So maybe that's why he didn't do it. Okay.
Okay.
Redeemed.
We'll. Okay.
Apologies to A.R. Brown Mueller
It
and
may
Robert
be
N. Watson.
Brownmuller. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But Brownmuller's notoriously cloth-eared, I have to say. But maybe he's got a policy. maybe there's a policy on amphibious sections to print them like that. That's okay.
That makes sense.
I understand that.
The
Yep.
middle line could be attached
Yeah.
to the
It is attached in a sense to
previous
both.
or the-
Yeah. So that's all right. Okay. However, slightly obscures the fact that there's an overlap here. It's terribly urgent. Well, in fact, you say no word to save thee.
No word to say.
Nay, hear me, Isabel.
Oh, 555.
Thy sin's not accidental, but a trade, she says.
So that's like, you know, that sin where you got your like fiance wife pregnant. I thought it was just an accident, but it's not. This is a
Yes,
trade. Like you're a
exactly.
pimp. You want everyone to be sleeping with everyone.
Exactly. Mercy to thee would prove as other Lord, is best that thou diest quickly. And then she's off.
So harsh.
Oh, hear me, Isabella.
She doesn't actually leave though.
No, she doesn't, because the
Yeah.
Duke comes.
We should probably leave it there though.
Oh, yeah, we should.
31 minutes, yeah.
Good Lord.
Alright.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Very good.
Okay, well, till the next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe.